The knock at the door wasn't friendly. It wasn't a polite, "Can I borrow some sugar?" kind of knock. No, it was sharp, deliberate, and entitled. The kind of knock you'd expect from someone who thought they owned the place, or at least thought they should. I stood in the hallway, staring at the door like it might bite me if I got too close. Something about that knock felt like a warning. But then again, when had my ex-wife Grace ever been subtle? I pulled the door open, and there she was. Grace. My ex dressed in designer clothes she likely couldn't afford, with sunglasses perched on her head like she was auditioning for a reality show no one wanted to watch. And beside her stood Daniel, the man she'd married after me, the man she'd left me for. His smirk was the kind that made you want to punch first and ask questions later. He didn't say a word at first, just looked me up and down like I was something he'd scrape off his shoe. Grace wasted no time. "Well, Thomas, aren't you going to invite us in?" I leaned against the doorframe, crossing my arms. "Depends. Did you bring a gift?" "That's usually what guests do." Her smile faltered for a fraction of a second, but she recovered quickly, turning her charm dial up to 11. "We're not here for pleasantries. We're here to discuss business." Daniel finally spoke, his voice dripping with mock sincerity. "Your father's estate. We have some rightful claims, and it's only fair we settle this like adults." "Rightful claims?" I couldn't help but laugh. "You're joking, right? Grace, you left me. You signed the divorce papers. And now you think you're entitled to my father's estate?" Grace stepped forward, her perfume overpowering as she crossed into my space. "Thomas, don't be unreasonable. You know how close I was to your father. He adored me." "Yeah, until he didn't," I interrupted. "Don't rewrite history just because you want a payday." Daniel's smirk grew wider, if that was even possible. "Listen, Tom." "It's Thomas," I corrected. "Only my friends call me Tom, and last I checked, you're not one of them." Daniel's jaw tightened, but he pushed on. "Look, this house is worth millions. Grace was part of this family for years, and as her husband, I think it's only right we discuss what portion of the estate belongs to her, and by extension, to us." The sheer audacity of the man was almost impressive. Almost. "You're not getting a penny," I said flatly, but before I could follow up with something less polite, another voice chimed in from behind me. "Well, this is a fascinating conversation," said Eleanor, my lawyer, stepping into view. She was holding her leather briefcase in one hand, her tablet in the other, and wearing the kind of calm, confident smile that made you believe she could take down an army with just her pen. "Thomas, aren't you going to introduce me?" Grace's face fell, but Daniel was still smirking, though it had morphed into something more uncertain. "And you are?" he asked, his tone teetering between curiosity and annoyance. "Eleanor Price," she said smoothly, "Thomas's attorney. And you must be Daniel, the man who thinks he can waltz in here and lay claim to something that doesn't belong to him. You're even bolder than I imagined." "Attorney?" Grace repeated, her confidence cracking. "Why would Thomas need an attorney?" "Because unlike some people, I like to be prepared," I said, stepping aside to let Eleanor fully into the doorway. "And I had a feeling you'd pull something like this." Eleanor opened her briefcase, pulling out a folder thicker than a dictionary. "Your timing is impeccable," she said to Grace and Daniel. "Thomas and I were just going over the details of Mr. Harrison's will. You know, the one that explicitly outlines who does and doesn't have any legal claim to the estate." The color drained from Grace's face, but Daniel stepped forward, puffing out his chest like a rooster in a barnyard. "This isn't over," he said. "You can play the legal game all you want, but we have rights. We'll see you in court if we have to." Eleanor smiled sweetly, tucking the folder back into her briefcase. "Oh, I'm counting on it." Grace pulled Daniel back, her composure barely holding. "Come on, Daniel," she hissed. "Let's go." As they retreated down the driveway, Daniel threw one last glare over his shoulder. "This isn't the end, Thomas. We'll be back." "Looking forward to it," I called after them. I closed the door and turned to Eleanor, who was already flipping through her notes. "Well, that was entertaining," she said. "But you'd better buckle up, Thomas. This is just the beginning." I nodded, feeling the weight of what was coming. My father's legacy meant everything to me, and if Grace and Daniel thought they could take it from me, They were about to learn how wrong they were. After Grace and Daniel's dramatic departure, I sat down in the living room with Eleanor. She was already pulling out more papers from her briefcase, her expression sharper than ever. "You were right," she said, sliding a thick file across the coffee table toward me. "Your father anticipated this. He was meticulous in preparing for exactly this kind of stunt." I opened the file, finding page after page of legal documents, financial records, and correspondence that my father had quietly compiled over the years. It was overwhelming, like seeing a map of a battle plan I didn't even know I was part of. My father had always been a step ahead, and now, even after his death, he was still guiding me. "What is all this?" I asked, flipping through the pages. "Evidence," Eleanor replied, sitting back and crossing her legs. "Your father didn't just write a will. He built a fortress. Every clause, every contingency, it's all designed to protect his estate from people like Grace and Daniel. He knew they'd try something like this." My stomach churned. "You're saying he saw this coming?" Eleanor nodded. "From the moment Grace walked out on you, he started putting plans in motion. He suspected she was only with you for the money, and when the divorce happened, it confirmed his fears. Then, when Daniel entered the picture, your father became even more cautious. He didn't trust either of them." I leaned back in the chair, the weight of my father's foresight settling on my shoulders. "So, what's the plan now?" Eleanor tapped her pen against her notebook. "First, we're going to make sure the will stands exactly as your father intended. Second, we're going to expose Grace and Daniel for who they really are. And finally, we're going to ensure that everything your father worked for stays in the family." Her confidence was reassuring, but it didn't make the situation any less infuriating. Grace and Daniel weren't just greedy, they were shameless. My father had barely been gone long enough for the flowers on his grave to wilt, and they were already circling like vultures. "What do we have on them?" I asked, needing to know how strong our case really was. Eleanor's lips curved into a small, knowing smile. "Quite a bit, actually. Your father was very thorough. He hired private investigators to look into their activities after the divorce, and the results are damning." She pulled out a smaller folder and handed it to me. I hesitated for a moment before opening it. Inside were photos of Grace and Daniel meeting with various people, some of them lawyers, others unrecognizable. One picture showed them in a bank, holding what appeared to be documents. Another showed them in a dimly lit restaurant, speaking with someone who looked suspiciously like a private investigator of their own. "What am I looking at?" I asked, my throat dry. "Evidence of their attempts to contest the will before your father even passed," Eleanor explained. "They've been planning this for months. Daniel, in particular, has been aggressive in trying to find loopholes or weak points they could exploit." I stared at the photos, my blood boiling. Grace and I had shared years together. We weren't perfect, but I'd always believed that, at the very least, she cared about me once. Now it seemed like every moment of our marriage had been part of some larger scheme. "And the will?" I asked, trying to keep my anger in check. "How airtight is it?" "As airtight as it gets," Eleanor assured me. "Your father included a clause, what we call a no-contest clause. It essentially states that if anyone tries to challenge the will, they risk forfeiting their inheritance entirely. So if they fight this, they'll lose everything." A grim sense of satisfaction settled over me. My father hadn't just been cautious, he'd been brilliant. Grace and Daniel thought they could outsmart him, but they were about to learn just how wrong they were. "What's next?" I asked, closing the folder and looking at Eleanor. "Next," she said, standing up and gathering her papers, "we prepare for the reading of the will. That's when this will all come to a head. Grace and Daniel are going to think they've won, and when they do, we'll be ready to show them just how wrong they are." I followed her to the door, my resolve hardening with every step. This wasn't just about protecting my father's legacy anymore. It was about standing up to people who thought they could take whatever they wanted without consequence. As Eleanor stepped outside, she turned back to me. "One more thing, Thomas. Your father left you something. It's not in the will, it's separate. I'll bring it to you tomorrow before the reading. He wanted you to have it when the time was right." "What is it?" I asked, curiosity piqued. She smiled. "You'll see." I watched her drive away, my mind racing. Whatever my father had left me, I had a feeling it was going to change everything. Grace and Daniel thought they had this in the bag, but they didn't know what they were walking into. They didn't know who they were up against. The next morning, Eleanor arrived right on time, holding a small leather-bound journal and a sealed envelope in her hands. There was a weight to her expression, one that told me whatever she had brought wasn't just another piece of legal strategy. It was personal. "This belonged to your father," she said, handing me the journal first. "He kept it during his last year, knowing things were coming to a head." I took the journal carefully, running my fingers over the worn leather cover. My father, Richard, had always been a man of quiet reflection, preferring to write down his thoughts rather than voice them aloud. This journal felt like a part of him I hadn't seen before. "What's in it?" I asked. Eleanor gestured for me to open it. His thoughts, suspicions, and plans. But more importantly, the truth about Grace. I sat down at the kitchen table and opened the journal. The first few pages were filled with entries about my father's declining health, his concerns for the future, and his determination to protect the family's legacy. But as I turned the pages, the tone shifted. March 15th. Grace is not the woman Thomas thinks she is. She came into his life with ulterior motives, and while I hoped their love would be genuine, it's clear now that she was only ever after what she thought she could gain. I've been watching her closely, and the signs are all there. Secret phone calls, unexplained trips, and now, Daniel. I paused, the words cutting deeper than I expected. My father had known. He had seen what I refused to acknowledge during my marriage. Grace's betrayal wasn't just personal. It had been calculated. I turned another page. April 2nd. Daniel is dangerous. He doesn't care about Grace beyond what she can deliver. He's pushing her to secure access to the estate, to manipulate me while I'm vulnerable. I won't let them win. I've started documenting everything, leaving no room for doubt when the time comes. Thomas will see the truth, even if it's painful. My hands trembled as I closed the journal. I looked up at Eleanor, who was watching me carefully. "He knew," I said, my voice hoarse. "He knew about all of it." Eleanor nodded. "And he made sure you'd have the tools to fight back." She handed me the envelope next. I opened it to find a letter in my father's handwriting, addressed directly to me. "My dearest Thomas, if you're reading this, it means the battle has begun. Grace and Daniel have made their move, just as I knew they would. I'm sorry you have to face this, but I want you to remember one thing. You are not alone. I've given Eleanor everything she needs to ensure the truth comes to light. Trust her and trust yourself. You're stronger than you think. As for Grace and Daniel, they've underestimated you and me. They think this is about money, but they're wrong. This is about integrity, about protecting what truly matters. Inside the journal, you'll find evidence of their deceit, but there's more to come. The will is only the beginning. Watch closely, Thomas. The pieces are already falling into place. With love and faith in you, Dad, asterisk. I set the letter down, my chest tight with emotion. Even from beyond the grave, my father was guiding me, standing beside me as I faced the people who had tried to tear our family apart. "There's one more thing," Eleanor said, interrupting my thoughts. She reached into her bag and pulled out a USB drive. "Your father hired a private investigator. This drive contains surveillance footage and audio recordings, everything he uncovered about Grace and Daniel's plans." I stared at the drive, my anger simmering beneath the surface. "What did he find?" Eleanor sighed. "Meetings with lawyers to discuss contesting the will. Bank transfers that suggest Grace was siphoning money from your joint account during your marriage. And Daniel? He's been bribing people left and right, trying to dig up dirt on you and your father." I clenched my fists, the weight of their betrayal crashing over me like a wave. They hadn't just wanted to hurt me, they wanted to destroy everything my father had built. Eleanor placed a hand on my shoulder. "Thomas, this isn't just about defending the estate anymore. It's about showing them they can't get away with this." I nodded, a newfound resolve settling in my chest. "Let's make sure they don't." As Eleanor packed up her things, I picked up my father's journal again, flipping to a page I hadn't read yet. A single phrase stood out, written in bold, deliberate letters. "The truth always comes to light." I closed the journal, the words echoing in my mind. Grace and Daniel thought they could manipulate me, deceive me, and take what wasn't theirs. But they didn't realize that my father had left me more than an inheritance. He'd left me the strength to fight back. The reading of the will was tomorrow, and I was ready for whatever came next. The day of the will reading arrived, and the tension in the room was palpable. Grace and Daniel sat across from me at the long conference table, looking far too confident for my liking. Grace was dressed to the nines, her sharp smile a mask of smug superiority, while Daniel lounged beside her, exuding the arrogance of someone who believed he'd already won. Eleanor sat to my left, calm and composed as always, her legal briefcase perched beside her. Across the room, the executor of my father's will, Mr. Warren, adjusted his glasses and prepared to begin. As he opened the official documents, Grace leaned forward, her eyes practically sparkling with anticipation. "Let's get this over with," she said, her voice dripping with fake charm. "We're all here for the same reason." I didn't respond, choosing instead to glance at Eleanor. She gave me a subtle nod, a signal that we were ready for what was about to unfold. Mr. Warren cleared his throat. This will was written and finalized 6 months before Mr. Harrison's passing. It clearly outlines the division of assets, including the estate, business holdings, and financial trusts. Grace practically purred. "Wonderful. I'm sure Richard left instructions that reflect his affection for everyone involved." "Affection?" I muttered under my breath. Eleanor hid a smirk. Mr. Warren continued. "The initial division is as follows. The Harrison estate, including this property, is to be allocated 60% to Thomas Harrison and 40% to us," Grace interrupted, sitting back in triumph. "Exactly as I expected." But Mr. Warren raised his hand, stopping her mid-gloat. "Please let me finish. The 40% allocation is contingent upon the fulfillment of specific conditions outlined in the will. These conditions are detailed in an addendum added 3 days before Mr. Harrison's death." Grace's smile faltered. "What conditions?" Mr. Warren glanced at Eleanor, who took the opportunity to speak. "The conditions involve a clause requiring a thorough investigation of any parties who attempt to claim inheritance under questionable pretenses." Daniel sat up straighter, his smirk replaced with unease. "What does that mean?" Eleanor's voice was steady, but her words hit like a hammer. "It means that any attempt to manipulate Mr. Harrison or his estate activates a no-contest clause. Essentially, if you're caught trying to deceive your way into an inheritance, you lose everything." Grace's confidence began to crack. "This is ridiculous," she snapped. "We've done nothing wrong." Eleanor raised an eyebrow, her expression almost amused. "Really? Then perhaps you'd like to explain these." She reached into her briefcase and pulled out a stack of documents and photographs, sliding them across the table for everyone to see. Grace hesitated, but Daniel snatched them up, flipping through them with increasing panic. "What is this?" he demanded. Eleanor leaned forward, her voice sharp. "Evidence. Photos of the two of you, meeting with lawyers to discuss contesting the will before Richard even passed. Bank statements showing suspicious transfers from Grace's account during her marriage to Thomas. Emails in which you, Daniel, pressured Richard's staff for information about the estate. Shall I go on?" Grace's face turned pale, but she wasn't ready to back down. "These are lies," she said, her voice shaky. "Fabricated to make us look bad." "Lies?" Eleanor echoed, pulling out another piece of paper. "This is a signed statement from one of Richard's nurses, detailing how you, Grace, attempted to bribe her for details about his health and the will. Still think it's fabricated?" Daniel's composure completely crumbled as he threw the photos back onto the table. "This is a setup," he spat. "You're trying to trap us." "No," Eleanor said, her tone icy. "You trapped yourselves. Richard Harrison was one of the sharpest men I've ever known, and he wasn't about to let anyone take advantage of him or his family." Grace's voice rose, desperate now. "This doesn't prove anything. Richard was old, sick. He probably didn't even know what he was signing." Eleanor's eyes narrowed. "Careful, Grace. Claiming that Richard wasn't of sound mind is a dangerous argument when we have evidence proving your attempts to manipulate him. You'd only incriminate yourself further." Daniel stood abruptly, his chair scraping against the floor. "We're leaving. This is a waste of time." But before he could storm out, Eleanor dropped her final bombshell. "Leaving won't change what happens next. This evidence is already with the authorities, and any attempt to challenge the will from here on out will result in criminal charges." The room went silent. Grace's hands were trembling now, her carefully constructed facade in shambles. Daniel looked like he wanted to disappear, his earlier bravado nowhere to be found. I leaned back in my chair, finally allowing myself a small smile. "I warned you not to come here." Grace glared at me, her voice venomous. "You think you've won, don't you? This isn't over." Eleanor stood, collecting her papers with a calm efficiency that only made Grace's fury more pathetic. "Oh, it's over," she said. "You just haven't realized it yet." As Grace and Daniel slinked out of the room, I felt a weight lift off my shoulders. My father's plan was working perfectly. The truth was coming to light, and Grace and Daniel's greed had led them straight into the trap they deserved. I turned to Eleanor. "What's next?" She smiled, her confidence unshaken. "Next? We let them dig their hole even deeper. The courtroom is where this really gets interesting." I nodded, ready for whatever came next. My father had prepared me for this, and I wasn't about to let him down. The day of reckoning was finally here, the courtroom showdown where Grace and Daniel would meet the consequences of their greed. Eleanor and I arrived early, her briefcase practically brimming with the evidence my father had meticulously gathered. The courthouse buzzed with activity, and I could see reporters already circling outside, eager for a sensational story. Inside, the courtroom was filled with an audience of curious onlookers. Grace and Daniel sat at the defendant's table, their expressions a mix of forced calm and barely concealed panic. Grace was impeccably dressed, as usual, but the cracks in her composure were beginning to show. Daniel, on the other hand, looked like he'd aged a decade overnight. Their attorney sat between them, whispering hurried reassurances that didn't seem to help. I sat beside Eleanor, who looked as calm and collected as ever. "They're going to fight this," I whispered. "They can try," she replied with a faint smile. "But your father left no loose ends." The judge entered, and the room fell silent. After the formalities, the case began with the reading of the will. The initial terms were straightforward. 60% of the estate was allocated to me, while 40% was to go to Grace and Daniel, contingent on fulfilling specific conditions. Grace sat up straighter, her confidence briefly returning. But then Eleanor stood, her presence commanding the room. "Your Honor, we would like to introduce evidence related to the conditions of the will, as outlined in the addendum." Grace's attorney stood quickly. "Objection, Your Honor. This is irrelevant to the initial distribution of assets." The judge raised an eyebrow. "Overruled. Proceed, Ms. Price." Eleanor stepped forward, her voice steady and precise. "The conditions of the will include a no-contest clause. This clause states that any party attempting to manipulate Mr. Richard Harrison or his estate forfeits their claim entirely. We have evidence that the defendants, Grace and Daniel, engaged in such manipulation." Gasps rippled through the courtroom. Grace's attorney scrambled to object again, but the judge waved him off. "Let her continue." Eleanor approached the bench, handing over a stack of documents. These include bank statements, photographs, and signed affidavits detailing the defendant's actions. Notably, we have proof of bribery attempts, fraudulent financial activities, and premeditated plans to contest the will before Mr. Harrison's passing. The judge reviewed the documents, his expression darkening. Grace's attorney looked like he wanted to crawl under the table. Daniel leaned over to whisper something to him, but the attorney ignored him, clearly out of his depth. Eleanor continued, her tone sharp. "Furthermore, we have video evidence of Grace and Daniel discussing their plans. This includes a recorded attempt to bribe Mr. Harrison's nurse for information about his condition and the contents of his will." At that, Eleanor pulled out a USB drive and handed it to the court clerk. Moments later, the video played on the courtroom screens. Grace's voice filled the room, unmistakably conniving. "Once the old man's gone, we'll challenge the will. Daniel, you just have to keep pressuring him. He's sick. He'll cave eventually." Grace's face turned white, and Daniel's jaw clenched as murmurs spread through the room. The judge silenced the crowd with a sharp bang of his gavel. "Do you deny this is your voice, Mrs. Grace Mitchell?" Eleanor asked, her words cutting like a knife. Grace hesitated, then stammered, "I. It's taken out of context." Eleanor didn't flinch. "Would you like to hear more context? We have hours of recordings." The room erupted in whispers again, and the judge banged his gavel once more. "Order. Mrs. Mitchell, please answer the question." Grace glanced at Daniel, who offered no help, then back at her attorney. Finally, she slumped in her chair. "No," she muttered. "I don't deny it." That single admission sealed their fate. Eleanor wasn't done yet. "Your Honor, I would also like to present evidence of financial fraud committed by the defendants. These bank statements show that Mrs. Mitchell funneled money from her joint account with Mr. Harrison during their marriage, transferring funds to accounts under her maiden name. Mr. Daniel Mitchell was complicit in these actions." Daniel exploded. "That's a lie." Eleanor calmly slid another document across the table. "These records beg to differ, Mr. Mitchell. You see, Mr. Harrison was thorough. He hired private investigators who tracked every dollar and every meeting. Your lies and schemes are all laid bare." The judge leaned forward, his expression stern. "Do the defendants have any response to these allegations?" Grace's attorney stood shakily. "Your Honor, my clients respectfully decline to comment at this time." The judge nodded grimly. "Then we'll proceed." The courtroom was silent except for the occasional scribble of reporters' pens and the judge's deliberate flipping of documents. Grace and Daniel sat rigidly, their earlier bravado long gone. The walls were closing in on them, and they knew it. The prosecution called me to the stand. As I walked past Grace and Daniel, I caught the faint hint of desperation in Grace's eyes, a glimmer of the control she was rapidly losing. Daniel, however, wouldn't even look at me. "Please state your name for the court," the prosecutor began. "Thomas Harrison," I said, my voice steady. "Mr. Harrison, can you describe your relationship to the defendants?" I glanced briefly at Grace and Daniel before answering. "Grace Mitchell is my ex-wife, and Daniel Mitchell is her current husband." The prosecutor nodded. "And during your marriage, did you observe any behavior from Mrs. Mitchell that might indicate financial misconduct or manipulation?" I hesitated for a moment, not because I didn't know what to say, but because I needed to steady myself. "Yes," I said finally. "Grace often withdrew large sums of money without explanation. When I questioned her about it, she would dismiss my concerns or claim it was for household expenses." "Did these withdrawals continue after your divorce?" "They did," I confirmed. I later learned she had accessed our joint accounts during the divorce proceedings, transferring money into private accounts under her maiden name. Grace's attorney stood abruptly. "Objection. This is speculative and irrelevant." The judge waved him off. "Overruled. The witness may continue." The prosecutor leaned in. "Mr. Harrison, are you aware of any actions taken by the defendants regarding your late father, Mr. Richard Harrison?" I nodded. "Yes. Grace and Daniel both attempted to manipulate my father in his final months. They visited him frequently, claiming to care about his well-being, but in reality, they were pressuring him for details about his will and estate." Gasps rippled through the audience, and I caught Grace shooting daggers at me with her eyes. Daniel shifted uncomfortably in his seat, his face pale. "Did your father ever share his suspicions about their intentions?" the prosecutor asked. I nodded again. "He did. My father was a cautious man, and he saw through their act. He even documented their attempts to manipulate him." "Can you elaborate on that documentation?" "My father hired private investigators to gather evidence. He collected photos, financial records, and even video recordings of their actions. He wanted to ensure his legacy was protected." The prosecutor approached the judge. "Your Honor, we would like to submit into evidence the surveillance footage provided by Mr. Richard Harrison." The court clerk loaded the footage onto the screens. The first clip showed Grace and Daniel in a hospital hallway, whispering conspiratorially. Grace's voice echoed through the room. "Once the will is read, we'll contest it. Daniel, you need to keep pushing him. Remind him how much I've sacrificed for this family." The second clip showed Daniel meeting with an unknown man in a parking lot, exchanging a thick envelope. The prosecutor explained, "This is footage of Mr. Mitchell bribing a nurse for confidential information about Mr. Harrison's health." Grace covered her face with her hands, while Daniel sat frozen, his jaw clenched so tightly it looked like it might snap. The courtroom murmured, the air thick with tension. The prosecutor turned back to me. "Mr. Harrison, what impact has this situation had on you?" I took a deep breath. Losing my father was devastating enough, but to watch Grace and Daniel try to exploit his death for their own gain, it's been infuriating and heartbreaking. My father built his legacy with hard work and integrity, and I refuse to let them tarnish it. The prosecutor nodded. "Thank you, Mr. Harrison. No further questions." As I returned to my seat, Grace's attorney rose to cross-examine me, but before he could begin, Grace stood abruptly, her chair screeching against the floor. "This is a sham," she shouted, her voice cracking with desperation. Richard was a stubborn old man who didn't know what he was doing in the end. "This so-called evidence doesn't prove anything." The judge banged his gavel. "Mrs. Mitchell, sit down, or I will hold you in contempt." But Grace wasn't done. She pointed a shaking finger at me. "You think you've won, don't you, Thomas? You think you're better than me because you're sitting there with that smug look on your face. Well, let me tell you something. You're nothing. Without your father's money, you'd have nothing." The courtroom erupted in chaos. Reporters scribbled furiously, and the judge's gavel thundered repeatedly. "Order. Mrs. Mitchell, that's enough." Daniel slouched in his chair, his head in his hands, clearly wishing he could disappear. Grace's attorney tried to calm her, but she shoved him away, continuing her tirade. "You'll regret this, Thomas. Mark my words." Two bailiffs approached and began escorting her out of the courtroom. She fought against them, yelling over her shoulder, "This isn't over." The judge ordered a recess, and Eleanor turned to me, her expression satisfied. "Well, that was better than I could have hoped for." Her outburst just sealed their fate. "She completely lost it," I said, still processing what had just happened. Eleanor nodded. The jury saw everything they needed to see. Grace and Daniel's schemes, their entitlement, and now their true colors. As we left the courtroom for a short break, I felt a weight lifting off my shoulders. The evidence was airtight, and Grace's meltdown had only solidified our case. My father's careful planning was paying off, and soon, justice would be served. After the courtroom recess, I returned to my seat, my mind swirling with thoughts of everything that had unfolded. Grace's meltdown was still fresh in everyone's mind, her outburst having left the jury with no doubt about her true nature. Daniel's silence, his unwillingness to defend her or even himself, only further cemented their guilt. Eleanor sat beside me, calm and focused as ever. But before the judge resumed proceedings, she leaned over and whispered, "There's one more thing your father planned that I haven't shared yet. It's time to play the final card." "What is it?" I asked, my curiosity piqued. She gave me a small, conspiratorial smile. "You'll see soon enough." The judge returned, and the proceedings resumed. The prosecutor stood and announced, "Your Honor, we have one final piece of evidence to submit, a statement recorded by Mr. Richard Harrison shortly before his passing." The room fell silent. Grace, now visibly shaken and pale, exchanged a nervous glance with Daniel. The judge nodded, granting the request, and the court clerk prepared the video. The screen came to life, and there he was, my father. Richard Harrison appeared thinner and frilier than I remembered, but his voice was as firm and commanding as ever. He sat in his favorite leather chair, the bookshelves of his study framing him in the background. "If you're watching this," he began, "then my suspicions have been confirmed. Grace and Daniel have attempted to claim a part of my estate through manipulation and deceit. To them, I say this. Your greed has blinded you to the fact that this was never about money. It was about integrity, about the values this family was built upon." He leaned forward, his gaze sharp and unyielding. "Grace, you entered my son's life under false pretenses, pretending to care for him while secretly plotting your own gain. And Daniel, you saw an opportunity to exploit that and took it without a second thought. But you underestimated me. You underestimated my son. And now, The consequences of your actions are unavoidable. The courtroom was completely still as my father continued. To my son, Thomas, I leave not just my estate but the responsibility to uphold our family's legacy. Thomas, I know this has been difficult, but you've handled it with strength and dignity. I'm proud of you. He paused, his expression softening briefly before hardening again. To those who think they can take what doesn't belong to them, remember this. The truth always finds its way to the light. And when it does, you will have no one to blame but yourselves. The video ended, leaving the courtroom in stunned silence. Grace looked as if she'd been physically struck, while Daniel's head hung low, his defeat written all over him. The prosecutor stood again, his voice calm and resolute. Your Honor, this video, along with the overwhelming evidence presented, demonstrates the defendant's intent to manipulate Mr. Harrison and his estate. We request that the court enforce the no contest clause in Mr. Harrison's will, barring Grace and Daniel Mitchell from receiving any inheritance. Grace's attorney feebly attempted to object, but the judge silenced him with a single raised hand. Enough. The evidence speaks for itself. The judge turned his attention to Grace and Daniel. Your actions have been nothing short of reprehensible. You betrayed a man's trust, manipulated his family, and tried to profit from his passing. The court hereby enforces the no contest clause. Grace and Daniel Mitchell are disqualified from any claim to the Harrison estate. The gavel struck, and it was over. Grace let out a choked gasp, her hand flying to her mouth as if to stifle a scream. Daniel simply slumped in his seat, looking like a man who had lost everything, because he had. As the courtroom emptied, Eleanor and I stayed behind for a moment. She pulled out a sealed envelope from her bag and handed it to me. Your father asked me to give this to you once the case was resolved. I opened it carefully, revealing another handwritten letter. Thomas, if you're reading this, it means justice has been served. But this letter isn't about them. It's about you. I wanted you to know how much I believed in you, how proud I am of the man you've become. This fight wasn't just about protecting the estate. It was about ensuring you understood your worth and strength. In the desk drawer of my study, you'll find one last surprise. It's something I hope will help you move forward and continue building the legacy we started together. With love, Dad. My hands trembled as I read the letter. Eleanor smiled softly. He thought of everything, didn't he? I nodded, my throat too tight to speak. Let's go, I finally said. I want to see what he left. Back at the house, I opened the drawer my father had mentioned. Inside, I found another envelope, this one containing a deed. It was for a piece of land adjacent to my father's estate, with a note attached. This is for you, Thomas. I bought it because I knew you'd make something beautiful out of it. Whatever you choose to do, know that I'll always be with you. I sat back, overwhelmed by the depth of my father's foresight and love. He hadn't just left me his estate. He'd left me a future, one filled with possibilities and the strength to move forward. That evening, as I stood in my father's garden, the weight of the past weeks finally began to lift. The roses he had planted swayed gently in the breeze, a reminder of his enduring presence. I thought of his words, the truth always finds its way to the light. It had, and now it was time to rebuild, not just for myself, but for the legacy my father had entrusted to me. The courtroom may have ruled in my favor, but the fallout from Grace and Daniel's actions was far from over. The media frenzy that followed was relentless, plastering their schemes and eventual downfall across every major news outlet. Reporters camped outside my father's estate, eager for quotes or sound bites, but Eleanor expertly shielded me from the chaos. Keep a low profile for now, she advised. Let the storm pass. You don't owe anyone your story. She was right. I had nothing to prove, but watching Grace and Daniel's public humiliation unfold brought a sense of closure I hadn't expected. A few days after the trial, I received a call from Eleanor. The DA's office has finalized the charges, she said. Grace and Daniel are facing multiple counts of fraud, conspiracy, and attempted bribery. Daniel's cooperation during the investigation might reduce his sentence, but Grace... She paused, her tone heavy. Grace could be looking at 10 to 15 years. I exhaled slowly, processing the weight of it all. Grace had always been manipulative, but I never thought she'd fall this far. Her desperation had blinded her to the reality of her actions, and now, she was paying the price. "What about Daniel?" I asked. "He's agreed to testify against her," Eleanor replied. "It's his best chance at a lighter sentence. Not exactly the loyal husband she thought he was." I almost laughed at the irony. Daniel, who had schemed and plotted alongside Grace, was now throwing her under the bus to save himself. It was poetic justice in a way. The more the police and DA dug into their actions, the more incriminating evidence surfaced. Grace's attempts to manipulate my father weren't her first offense. She had a long history of targeting wealthy individuals, dating back years. Offshore accounts, fake business ventures, and fraudulent documents all pointed to a well-practiced con artist. But this time, she'd made a fatal error, underestimating my father. His meticulous planning and foresight had caught her in a web of her own making. I thought about the private investigators my father had hired, the surveillance footage, the recordings, every piece of evidence he had so carefully gathered. He had known exactly how this would play out, and he had ensured she wouldn't escape accountability. A week after the trial, Eleanor convinced me to hold a brief press conference. "Control the narrative," she said. "Show them you're moving forward." Standing in front of a crowd of reporters, I took a deep breath and began. My father was a man of integrity, a man who believed in justice and hard work. His legacy was never about wealth. It was about the values he instilled in me and everyone who knew him. While recent events have been difficult, they've reminded me of the importance of protecting what truly matters: family, honesty, and resilience. I want to thank the court for ensuring justice was served and my father's wishes were honored. As for me, I plan to honor his legacy by continuing the work he started. I didn't take questions afterward. There was nothing more to say. With the court battle behind me, I turned my attention back to the estate. Walking through the house and garden, I felt an overwhelming sense of peace. This wasn't just a house. It was a testament to my father's love and dedication. Every brick, every tree, every flower bed held memories of him. But it wasn't enough to simply preserve what he had built. I wanted to expand it, to create something that would honor his legacy for generations to come. Eleanor and I sat down to discuss the next steps. "The land your father bought next to the estate," she said. "What do you want to do with it?" I thought about it for a long moment before replying. "I want to create a public garden, something beautiful and open to everyone." My father believed in sharing what he had, and I think he'd love the idea. Eleanor smiled. "Harrison Gardens," she said. "It has a nice ring to it." Not long after the press conference, I received an unexpected letter. It was from Grace. I hesitated before opening it, unsure if I even wanted to hear what she had to say. Inside was a single page, her handwriting shaky and uneven. "Thomas, I don't expect your forgiveness, but I needed to say this. I was wrong about everything. I let greed and pride destroy what we had, and I regret it more than you'll ever know. You were a good man, and your father was a great one. I failed to see that when it mattered. I don't blame you for what happened. I blame myself. I hope you find peace. Grace." I folded the letter and set it aside. It didn't change anything, but maybe, just maybe, it meant she had finally begun to understand the gravity of her actions. Months passed, and the land my father had purchased began to transform. Harrison Gardens became a reality, a sprawling, vibrant space filled with the flowers and plants my father had loved so much. Visitors from all walks of life came to enjoy its beauty, and with every bloom, I felt a deeper connection to my father's spirit. Eleanor and Isaiah, my cousin, who had stepped in to help during the chaos, stood beside me during the grand opening. "He'd be proud," Eleanor said, her voice soft. "I hope so," I replied, looking out at the crowd. This is what he wanted. Not just justice, but growth. And that's what it was. Grace and Daniel had tried to take everything from me, but they'd failed. My father's legacy remained intact, stronger than ever. And as the garden bloomed around me, I knew I'd found something even more valuable than justice. I'd found peace. The garden was flourishing. Bright, vibrant flowers swayed gently in the breeze, a living testament to my father's legacy. Harrison Gardens had become more than just a project. It was a symbol of resilience, growth, and new beginnings. Months after the courtroom battles and public fallout, life finally began to settle. The chaos that Grace and Daniel had brought into my life felt like a distant memory, their influence reduced to lessons learned and strength gained. My father's words echoed in my mind often. The truth always finds its way to the light. One morning, Isaiah, my cousin, and one of the few family members who had stood by me, visited the garden. He'd been instrumental in managing the estate while I focused on building something meaningful. "This place is incredible, Thomas," he said, his voice filled with admiration as he walked along the garden paths. "Your father would have loved this." I smiled, wiping my hands on my gardening gloves. He always said beauty can grow in the hardest soil. I think this proves him right. Isaiah nodded, then hesitated. "I've been thinking, maybe it's time to expand this even further. A community center. Maybe? Something that could offer more than just beauty, education, resources, a place where people can connect." His suggestion caught me off guard, but also sparked something in me. My father's legacy wasn't just about the garden. It was about giving back, about building something lasting. I nodded slowly. "Let's do it. Let's make this more than just a garden." One afternoon, as I sorted through old files in my father's study, I came across Grace's letter again. I hadn't thought about it much since the day I read it, but something compelled me to pick it up. Her words still carried the weight of regret, but I didn't feel anger anymore. I didn't feel anything, really, just a quiet sense of closure. Grace and Daniel had made their choices, and they were living with the consequences. I had no intention of responding, but I also had no desire to hold on to the bitterness they tried to leave behind. I placed the letter in a drawer, closing it both literally and figuratively. It was time to let go completely. The day of the official opening for Harrison Gardens was sunny and warm, as if the weather itself was blessing the occasion. Families, couples, and individuals from all over the community came to see what we had built. The laughter of children echoed through the garden, blending with the soft rustle of leaves and the hum of bees. Eleanor stood beside me, holding a cup of coffee. "You did it," she said simply. "We did it," I corrected her. "I couldn't have done this without you." She smiled, raising her cup in a toast. "To Richard Harrison, a man who knew how to plan for everything." "To Dad," I said, raising my own invisible toast. "And to second chances." As the months rolled on, Harrison Gardens grew into something I could never have imagined. We added a small cafe, a library corner, and even hosted workshops on gardening and sustainability. The community center Isaiah suggested became a reality, offering free classes, events, and resources to those in need. The garden had become a hub of life and activity, a place where people came to find peace, connection, and inspiration. It was everything my father would have wanted, and more. One evening, as I walked through the garden at sunset, I found myself stopping at a small plaque I had placed near the entrance. It read, "In loving memory of Richard Harrison, a man who taught us that even in the hardest soil, something beautiful can grow." I ran my fingers over the engraving, a lump forming in my throat. My father had done more than protect his legacy. He had given me the tools to build one of my own. As I stood there, watching the sun dip below the horizon, I realized something. This was my new beginning. Grace and Daniel were the past, their schemes nothing more than shadows. What mattered now was the life I was building, one bloom at a time. The truth had come to light, justice had been served, and now it was time to move forward, to grow, to bloom, to live. And with that, the journey came full circle, not just for me, but for everyone touched by my father's life and legacy. I used to think words were just words, fleeting, meaningless when spoken in anger. But sometimes, a single sentence can hit harder than a punch. A single moment can unravel everything you thought was real. Why don't you just disappear? Mia's voice cut through the dinner table silence like a blade. She wasn't screaming, wasn't throwing a tantrum like she used to when she was younger. No, this was different. Her voice was calm, precise, like she'd been waiting for the moment to say it. And then came the killing blow. "We'd be better off without you," Rachel said. At first, I thought I misheard. Maybe I was so shaken by Mia's words that my mind filled in the gaps. But no, Rachel's tone was measured, steady. She didn't say it in a fit of rage. She didn't throw her fork down dramatically. She just said it, like it was fact, like she'd already decided. I stared at her, waiting for her to take it back, to soften the blow, to do something, anything, to show she didn't mean it. But she just picked up her wine glass and took a slow sip, avoiding my eyes. The air in the room changed. You ever notice how silence isn't just the absence of sound? Sometimes, silence is heavy, pressing down on your chest, making it hard to breathe. That's what this silence felt like. I looked at Mia, 16 years old. My daughter, not by blood, but by choice. She was 12 when I married Rachel, already headstrong, already skeptical of me. I spent years, earning her trust. Late-night conversations about books, movie nights where she'd pretend not to enjoy my stupid dad jokes, helping her with homework when she struggled but was too proud to ask her mom for help. And now, for words had wiped all of that away. I could have fought back, could have demanded an explanation, could have reminded them of all the times I'd been there when Jordan, the man who contributed DNA but nothing else, had disappeared for years at a time. But I didn't. I didn't say a single word. I just stood up, my chair scraping against the wooden floor, and walked upstairs. The weight of their stares followed me as I moved through the house. I wanted to turn back, to catch a flicker of regret in Rachel's expression, to see if Mia was shocked by what she'd said. But I didn't give them that satisfaction. I walked into our bedroom, grabbed my old duffel bag from the closet, and started packing. Not mindlessly, carefully. I wasn't storming out in a fit of rage, grabbing whatever I could and shoving it into a suitcase. No, I packed with purpose. A few shirts, enough clothes for a few days. My toothbrush, phone charger, passport, just in case. As I packed, I noticed something strange. My hands weren't shaking. I always thought that if my marriage ever came to this, I'd be a wreck, pleading, breaking down, trying to fix things. But I wasn't. I was calm, too calm. Downstairs, I could hear hushed voices. Mia's footsteps as she stormed off to her room. The clinking of dishes as Rachel cleared the table. But no one came upstairs. No one stopped me. The realization hit like a gut punch. They didn't care. They weren't expecting me to fight back. They weren't expecting me to stay. And for the first time in my life, I truly felt like an outsider in my own home. I zipped up my bag, slung it over my shoulder, and made my way downstairs. Rachel was leaning against the kitchen counter, arms crossed. Her expression was unreadable. Not angry, not regretful, just waiting. "So you're just leaving?" she asked. "You said you'd be better off," I replied, checking my pocket for my keys. "I'm respecting that." Her lips parted slightly like she was about to say something, but she stopped herself. Pride? Guilt? Or maybe she was just too damn stubborn to admit she didn't mean it. I walked to the front door, gripping the handle. Before I left, I turned to look at her one last time. "You know," I said quietly, "when Mia said those things before, it hurt. But hearing you agree, that broke something, Rachel." She blinked, just once. No sharp retort, no biting comment. Just silence. I opened the door and stepped out. The cold night air hit me like a slap, but I welcomed it. It felt more real than anything that had happened in the last hour. I got into my car and drove away without looking back. It wasn't until I pulled into Noah's driveway that it really hit me. This wasn't just a fight. This wasn't just a bad night. I might never go back. And the scariest part? I wasn't sure if I wanted to. Waking up in an unfamiliar bed wasn't the worst part. It was the silence. You ever notice how a house sounds different depending on who's in it? Even in sleep, a home is alive. Soft breathing from the next room, the creak of someone shifting under the covers, the faint hum of the fridge or the whisper of the heater kicking in. But Noah's guest room was silent. Not peaceful, not comforting, just empty. I stared at the ceiling, replaying last night's events over and over again in my head. Why don't you just disappear? We'd be better off without you. The words had settled into my chest like stones, pressing down with every breath. I thought maybe, in the light of day, it would hurt less. Maybe I'd wake up to a text from Rachel saying she didn't mean it. Maybe Mia would apologize. I turned over and grabbed my phone. 27 missed calls. Rachel, Mia, even Olivia, my sister. I exhaled slowly. I should have felt relieved, right? If they were calling, it meant something had changed. Maybe regret had set in. Maybe Rachel had realized what she'd said. Maybe Mia had seen my empty chair at the breakfast table and felt a twinge of guilt. Maybe, but something felt off. Rachel wasn't the kind of person who'd call 15 times unless something was wrong. Olivia wasn't the type to get involved unless she had to. A bad feeling crawled up my spine. I sat up and pulled on my jeans, still creased from yesterday. Noah was already in the kitchen when I stepped out, scrolling on his phone, a cup of coffee in his free hand. "You look like hell," he said without looking up. "Good morning to you too," I muttered, grabbing a mug. He finally glanced at me. "You check your phone yet?" "Yeah." I took a sip of coffee. 27 missed calls. Noah raised an eyebrow. "You call back?" I shook my head. He studied me for a moment, then turned his phone around and slid it across the counter. I stared at the screen. At first, I didn't process what I was looking at. It was a photo. A smiling man, sitting at a table in a restaurant, tagged at a location in Chicago. The caption was simple: "Reunited at last. Family is everything." And there, right next to him, was Mia, smiling, happy. The man sitting beside her was Jordan. I blinked, looked again. My stomach twisted. When was this taken? My voice came out low, steady. "Posted last night," Noah said, taking a sip of his coffee. "Looks like he's been back in town for a while." I stared at Mia's face in the picture. That hopeful smile, the kind she used to get when she thought something amazing was about to happen. When she got accepted to that summer program last year. When I taught her how to drive, and she finally nailed parallel parking. She was looking at Jordan that way, like he was the answer to everything. Like he hadn't abandoned her for years. I scrolled down, my hands tightening around the phone. The comments were filled with heart emojis. Friends saying things like, "So happy for you." And finally together. They didn't know. They didn't know that Jordan had missed 6 birthdays. That he'd promised Mia a trip to the beach when she was 10 and never showed up. That the last time he'd come back into her life, he had stayed for 2 weeks before disappearing again. And Rachel, she let this happen. I opened my call log, hovered over Rachel's name. I should call. I should demand an explanation. But I didn't. Instead, I did something I hadn't done in months. I checked Mia's Instagram. Her latest post was a selfie with Jordan. The caption? "Real family time." I inhaled sharply. My grip tightened on the phone. Real family. I wasn't in any of her photos. I scrolled further, past old posts, past birthday pictures, past vacation photos. It took me too long to realize what was wrong. I wasn't in any of them. Not one. Even photos I knew I had been in. The trip to Yellowstone last summer, Christmas morning by the tree, her 16th birthday party. I was gone. Not just untagged. Removed. A hollow feeling settled in my chest. This wasn't just about last night. This wasn't anger. This wasn't rebellion. This was erasure. I set the phone down carefully. My coffee had gone cold. I pushed it aside. Noah must have seen something in my face because his expression shifted. "You okay?" I exhaled, slow, measured. "No." He nodded like he expected that. "You gonna call her?" Rachel's name was still on my screen. I stared at it. Then I looked back at Mia's Instagram. Real family time. I made a decision. I slid the phone back across the counter and stood up. "I'm going home," I said. Noah didn't try to stop me. Because this time, I wasn't going back for them. I was going back to see what was left of me. The drive home was quieter than I expected. No radio. No traffic noise that I paid attention to. Just the sound of my thoughts, circling the same realization over and over again. I had been erased. Not just forgotten. Not just ignored. Erased. Mia hadn't just stopped talking to me. She had rewritten history. The vacations, the birthdays, the moments we shared, gone. And Rachel had allowed it. The closer I got to the house, the tighter the knot in my stomach became. I didn't know what I was walking into. Were they waiting for me? Had Mia even noticed I was gone? Did Rachel regret anything? Or was she already imagining a life where I didn't exist? I pulled into the driveway, staring at the house I had called home for years. Nothing looked different from the outside. The lawn was still neatly trimmed. The lights were still on. If a stranger had passed by, they wouldn't have guessed that the man inside had been told he was disposable less than 24 hours ago. I stepped out of the car, pocketed my keys, and made my way up the porch. My fingers hesitated on the door handle. I wasn't coming back to beg. I wasn't coming back to argue. I just needed to see, to confirm what I already knew deep down. When I stepped inside, I was met with silence. Not the comfortable, peaceful kind, but the heavy, unnatural kind. Like the house itself was waiting. And then I saw it. The wall of family photos in the living room. I had noticed the missing pictures before, but now, standing in front of them, it was even worse than I thought. It wasn't just a few missing frames. I had been deliberately cut out. One by one, the moments we had shared, altered. The Yellowstone trip? I had taken that photo, but now, a gap in the composition showed where I had once stood. Christmas morning? Mia had been sitting next to me, unwrapping the book she had begged for all year. But now the image looked wrong, like someone had been cropped out. I took a step back. My breathing was steady, but my hands clenched at my sides. This wasn't an accident. This was intentional. The floor above me creaked. A door softly clicked shut. Mia. I stayed still, listening. She had noticed I was here. For a moment, there was silence. Then, after a slight hesitation, her footsteps moved toward the stairs. I turned just in time to see her coming down, phone in hand, avoiding my eyes. She didn't greet me, didn't say anything, just walked past, heading toward the kitchen. Morning, I said, my voice even. She paused, just for a second. Then, without looking at me, she muttered, morning. The tension in the air was thick. 3 years of building trust, of bonding, of being the one who was always there. And this is where we had ended up. That's a lot of calls you made, I continued, keeping my tone neutral. Finally, she glanced at me. Mom wanted me to. So it hadn't been her. Of course not. She shifted uncomfortably, fingers gripping her phone like it was a lifeline. How long has this been going on? I asked. She frowned. What? The photos. The erasing. How long? She looked at me now, fully. And there it was, the same defiance I had seen last night. But beneath it, I caught something else. Something smaller, something fragile. Guilt. A while, she admitted. Before last night? She nodded. I let that sink in. So this wasn't just a reaction to our fight. This wasn't just a teenage outburst. She had been preparing for this. Is this what you wanted? I asked quietly. To pretend I was never here? She exhaled sharply, looking away. It's not like that. Then what's it like? Her jaw tightened. I don't know, okay? It felt easier. Easier? Yeah, she snapped. Easier than having to explain. Easier than. She cut herself off, shaking her head like she'd already said too much. I watched her carefully. Explain what, Mia? Her phone buzzed. She glanced down. I didn't have to ask who it was. Jordan. Of course. Mia, I said slowly. How long has he been talking to you? She hesitated. That was all the confirmation I needed. I took a step closer. Before last night? Before this week? Another hesitation. Months, she finally admitted. I closed my eyes briefly, letting the weight of that settle. Months. While I had been in this house, thinking everything was fine, he had been in her ear, feeding her his version of the truth. Did Mom know? She nodded. She didn't want to tell you. She thought it would just make things worse. Worse. Rachel had known. She had known Jordan was back, that he was talking to Mia, filling her head with whatever lies he had convinced himself of, and she had let it happen. Did he tell you to do it? I asked, voice steady. Erase me? Mia's lips parted slightly. That flicker of guilt flashed again. She didn't answer. She didn't need to. I nodded slowly, stepping back. Got it. Mia shifted uncomfortably. It's not. I raised a hand. You don't have to explain. I turned away, heading toward the door. I had heard enough, because now I knew the truth. This wasn't just about her being mad at me. This wasn't just about teenage rebellion. This was Jordan's influence. And Rachel had let it happen. As I walked out of the house, I knew one thing for certain. This wasn't over. I didn't drive far. I couldn't. I pulled into an empty parking lot outside a closed cafe, gripping the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles turned white. The anger that had been simmering since last night was boiling over. But it wasn't just anger. It was something worse. Betrayal. Mia had been talking to Jordan for months. Rachel had known. And neither of them had told me. I pressed my forehead against the steering wheel, taking slow, measured breaths. I wasn't going to break down. I wasn't going to lose control. I needed to think. My phone buzzed against the passenger seat. I didn't have to look to know who it was. I let it ring. I let the silence stretch. Then I picked it up. 27 missed calls yesterday. Another 8 this morning. Rachel, Mia, Olivia, and now, a number I didn't recognize. I hesitated, then answered. Hello? Mr. Carter? The voice was unfamiliar, professional. A woman. This is Mrs. Taylor, Mia's guidance counselor at Westbridge High. I hope I'm not catching you at a bad time. I sat up. No, it's fine. What's going on? A pause. A measured inhale. I wanted to reach out because I've noticed some recent changes in Mia's academic plans that concern me. My grip on the phone tightened. Changes? Yes. As of yesterday, she submitted withdrawal forms for all her advanced placement classes. She's also dropping French club and student council. I asked her why, and she said she's transferring schools next semester. I nearly dropped the phone. She what? Mrs. Taylor continued, her voice calm but laced with concern. She requested her transcripts be sent to 3 schools in Chicago. My stomach twisted. Jordan. Chicago. I ran a hand down my face. And you're just now telling me this? To be honest, I would have contacted you sooner, but her mother signed off on everything. I assumed it was a family decision. A bitter laugh escaped me. Yeah. No. Definitely not a family decision. Another pause. I see. Mr. Carter, I don't mean to overstep, but I've known Mia since freshman year. She's always been driven, ambitious. She had a clear college plan, and now, within a matter of days, she's giving it all up to follow someone to another city. That's not normal. No, it wasn't. It was textbook manipulation. I shut my eyes, inhaling deeply. She said anything else? Just that she's found a new opportunity, and that her father believes she's wasting her potential here. Her father. Not me. Not the man who had raised her. Not the man who had been at every school function, every late-night breakdown, every moment when she needed someone. Jordan had swooped in after years and already convinced her she needed to throw her future away for him. I forced my voice to stay level. Did she mention what kind of opportunity? A beat of hesitation. She said it was something in business. A startup. I clenched my jaw. Let me guess. Her father's startup? Yes. I laughed, but there was no humor in it. Just disbelief. Just rage bubbling beneath the surface. I knew exactly what was happening. Jordan had done this before. Not just to Mia, not just to Rachel, to others. Years ago, he had convinced Rachel to loan him $20,000 for a sure-thing business venture. She never saw a dime of it. When Mia was 13, Jordan had resurfaced, promising her the world, only to vanish 2 weeks later, right after getting another $5,000 out of Rachel. And now, he was back. I exhaled slowly, gripping my knee. Mrs. Taylor, I need to ask you something, and I need you to be honest. Do you think Mia is making these decisions because she truly believes in them, or do you think she's being manipulated? Another pause. Then, quietly, I think she's being manipulated. I closed my eyes. That was all I needed to hear. Thank you, I said. I appreciate the call. If there's anything I can do, I'll handle it, I said. And I would. I hung up, staring out the windshield. Mia wasn't just pulling away from me. She was being ripped away. I knew Jordan. I knew his tricks. He was laying the groundwork for something bigger. Convincing her to erase me was just step one. The next step? Get her dependent on him. Get her financially tied to him. Make sure she feels like he's the only one who believes in her. I couldn't let that happen. I wouldn't. I took another breath, steadying myself. First things first. I needed to see Rachel. I turned the ignition, backed out of the parking lot, and headed home. When I pulled into the driveway, Rachel's car was already there. Good. I stepped out and walked up to the door, knocking sharply. A moment later, the door opened. Rachel stood there, arms crossed, eyes guarded. "You're back." I pushed past her, stepping inside. "Where's Mia?" "She's out," Rachel said, shutting the door. "What's going on?" I turned to face her. "You tell me, because I just got off the phone with Mrs. Taylor, and she says our daughter is dropping out of everything and transferring to Chicago." Rachel's expression faltered, just for a second. Then, her walls went back up. "I was going to tell you," she said. "When?" My voice was sharp now. "When she was already gone?" Rachel sighed, rubbing her temple. "Lucas, How long have you known?" I interrupted. "How long have you known he's been back? That he's been talking to her? That he's been filling her head with this garbage?" Her lips pressed together. "A few months." My stomach twisted. "Months." I took a slow step closer. "And you didn't think I deserved to know?" Rachel lifted her chin. "I thought I could handle it." "You thought you could handle Jordan?" I scoffed. "The same man who stole from you? The same man who lied to Mia, abandoned her, disappeared for years at a time? You really thought he just wanted to be a father now?" Rachel hesitated. I ran a hand down my face. "Jesus, Rachel. I was scared," she snapped suddenly. "All right? I was scared that if I pushed too hard, she'd cut me out, that she'd choose him." I inhaled sharply. "So instead, you let her erase me." Silence. Rachel exhaled, looking away. I didn't know what to do. I nodded slowly. "Well, now you don't have a choice." Rachel blinked. "What do you mean?" I pulled out my phone. "I'm stopping this. Now." Rachel's face paled. "What are you going to do?" I met her eyes. "I'm going to make sure he never gets the chance to do this to her, or anyone again." Rachel stood in front of me, arms crossed, lips pressed into a tight line. I could see the tension in her shoulders, the way her fingers twitched at her sides. But I didn't care. I wasn't here to argue. I was here to end this. "You can't just stop Jordan," Rachel said, voice sharp. "He's already gotten into Mia's head. If you push too hard, you'll just make her run to him faster." "She's already running," I shot back. "Or did you miss the part where she's transferring schools? Where she's about to hand him her entire college fund?" Rachel flinched. "I didn't." "Didn't what?" I demanded. "Didn't think it would go this far? Didn't think he'd do it again?" I let out a bitter laugh. "You should have known better. We both should have." Her jaw tightened. "You think I don't feel guilty? I think you're more worried about keeping Mia's trust than keeping her safe." That one landed. Her face crumpled for half a second before she masked it. I exhaled, running a hand down my face. "Look, I don't have time for this. You want to keep pretending like Jordan's not dangerous? Fine. But I'm not standing by and letting him do to Mia what he's done to you. What he's done to God knows how many other people." Rachel stared at me, something flickering behind her eyes. "What do you mean?" I pulled out my phone and scrolled to the folder I had created years ago, the one I had hoped I'd never need again. Then I turned the screen toward her. Rachel's breath hitched. There it was. The evidence. Jordan's history of scams. The fake business ventures, the stolen money, the victims who had tried and failed to get justice. "This isn't just about Mia," I said. "This is his pattern. He finds people, gains their trust, makes them believe in him, and then he drains them dry and moves on to the next target." Rachel's face paled as she scrolled through the files. "Where did you get all this?" "I've been keeping track since the last time he showed up," I admitted. "I had a feeling he'd come back one day." Rachel swallowed. "And Mia is his next investment," I finished. "Unless we stop him." Rachel stared at the phone, her hands tightening around it. For the first time, I saw real fear in her eyes. "You have a plan," she finally said. "I do." She hesitated. "What is it?" I exhaled. "We take him down. Legally. Publicly. We expose him." Rachel's expression darkened. "How?" I glanced at my phone. "With a little help." I scrolled through my contacts and called Olivia. She picked up on the second ring. Lucas, I need a favor. A pause. Is this about Mia? Yes. And Jordan? Silence. Then, what do you need? I looked at Rachel. Connections. Someone who can help us take him down for good. Olivia didn't even hesitate. I know someone at the Securities and Exchange Commission. Jordan's running a fraud scheme. If he's soliciting investments under false pretenses, they can investigate. My grip on the phone tightened. That's exactly what he's doing. He's trying to get Mia and her friend's parents to invest in his startup. Olivia cursed under her breath. All right, I'll make some calls. Send me everything you have. Already on it. We hung up, and I turned back to Rachel. Step 1. Get the SEC involved. Step 2. Get the police involved. Step 3? I smiled coldly. Set a trap? Rachel exhaled. You want to bait him? Exactly. She looked uncertain. Lucas, if we do this, Mia's going to hate us. For a while? Probably. I met her eyes. But I'd rather she hate me for stopping him than resent me for letting him ruin her life. Rachel looked away. She won't forgive me. She will, I said. Eventually. Rachel exhaled. And if this doesn't work? I shrugged. Then at least I'll know I did everything I could. Rachel hesitated, then nodded. What's the plan? I pulled up Jordan's latest text from the family group chat. Big announcement at dinner tomorrow night. Can't wait to share the news. I smirked. We're going to crash his party. The next evening, I sat outside the restaurant, watching the guests arrive. Rachel sat beside me, twisting a napkin in her hands. She looked nervous. Good. She should be. Are you sure this will work? She asked. It's already working, I said, nodding toward a black sedan parked nearby. Inside? Federal agents. And inside the restaurant? 3 parents wearing hidden microphones. Jordan was about to sell them on his fake company, and we were about to catch him in the act. Rachel exhaled. Mia's inside. I know. She's going to be furious. I know. She looked at me. You still want to do this? I turned to her. Would you rather let her sign over her college fund to a con artist? Rachel didn't answer. I opened the car door. Let's go. Inside, the restaurant was buzzing with conversation. Jordan sat at the head of a long table, exuding confidence, smiling at Mia like she was his prized possession. I wanted to break his nose. Instead, I walked forward. Jordan's smile faltered when he saw me. Lucas, he said, feigning surprise. Didn't expect to see you here. I smirked. I figured if you were having a family dinner, I should be invited. Mia's face darkened. Dad, what are you doing here? I ignored her, turning to Jordan. So, tell me about this business opportunity. I hear it's a once-in-a-lifetime investment. Jordan's smile didn't waver, but I saw the flicker of hesitation. That's right, he said smoothly. I'm giving my family and close friends the chance of a lifetime. I nodded. And all you need is a few $100,000 from the people you love? His eyes sharpened. Lucas, I don't think this is the time or place. I smirked. Actually, it's the perfect time. I turned toward the doorway. Because there are some people who'd like to join us. On cue, the agents entered. Jordan's face drained of color. The agents walked straight toward him. Jordan Williams? Jordan stood quickly. There must be some mistake. There's no mistake, one agent said, holding up a folder. We have evidence of securities fraud, wire fraud, and investment fraud. You're under arrest. Mia gasped. Jordan turned to her. Sweetheart, I don't know what's happening. This is just a misunderstanding. Mia looked at me, wide-eyed. And for the first time in months, I saw doubt in her face. Dad, she whispered. I met her gaze. I told you, kid. Real family protects you. And as Jordan was cuffed and dragged away, I saw the moment Mia realized. I had never been the villain in this story. The restaurant was silent. The kind of silence that comes after a disaster, after the dust has settled but no one knows what to say. Jordan was gone. The federal agents had led him out in handcuffs, their voices calm, professional, as they read him his rights. A few guests had gasped, others had frozen in place, not sure whether to pretend they hadn't just witnessed a takedown or to start whispering about it immediately. But the only reaction I cared about was Mia's. She stood there, unmoving, staring at the door Jordan had just been dragged through. Her shoulders were tense, her hands clenched into fists at her sides. I could see it happening in real time, the shattering of the illusion. I took a careful step toward her. "Mia, don't," she snapped. Her voice was sharp, but it wavered, just enough to tell me she was trying to hold herself together. She turned slowly, her eyes blazing. But beneath the anger, I saw something else. Betrayal. "You set him up," she said. I held her gaze. "I protected you." "Protected me?" Her voice rose slightly, sharp enough that a few lingering guests looked over before awkwardly turning away. "You ambushed him. You got him arrested." I exhaled. "Mia, listen to me. Jordan wasn't who you thought he was. He was." "I know who he is," she shouted, her face red now. "He's my father." I flinched. I didn't mean to, but it hit harder than I expected. Not because she still saw him that way, but because she said it like I wasn't. Rachel placed a hand on Mia's arm, her voice soothing. "Sweetheart, he was scamming you. He was scamming all of us." Mia yanked her arm away. "You both lied to me. You humiliated him in front of everyone. Do you have any idea how that felt?" Rachel's face fell. "Mia, I hate you." The words cut through the room like a whip. Rachel froze. I swallowed hard. Mia's chest was rising and falling fast, her breaths uneven, tears brimming in her eyes. But she wasn't done. "I trusted you," she said, voice breaking. "I thought," she shook her head violently, "you didn't have to do this. You didn't have to ruin everything." Rachel tried again. "Mia, we were trying to keep you safe." Mia let out a sharp, bitter laugh. "Right. Safe." She turned her glare on me. "You never wanted me to have a relationship with him. You just waited for an excuse to get rid of him." My jaw clenched. "That's not true." "Isn't it?" she challenged. "You were jealous. You couldn't stand that he came back, that I wanted to be with him." I exhaled slowly, pushing down the frustration, the exhaustion, the sheer helplessness of trying to reach her through the anger. "You know what hurts the most?" she continued, voice trembling. "I thought you were different. I thought you actually—" She cut herself off, pressing her lips together, shaking her head. I stepped closer. "Mia, I love you." Her breath hitched, just barely. "No, you don't. You just want to control me." That one hurt. That one hurt like hell. Because I had spent 16 years proving to her that I wasn't Jordan. That I wouldn't leave, that I wouldn't hurt her, that I wouldn't lie. And now, in her eyes, I was the villain. I nodded slowly. "Okay," I said, voice steady. "If that's what you believe, then I won't try to convince you otherwise." Mia blinked, caught off guard. "But let me ask you one thing," I continued. "If he was innocent, why did he run?" She opened her mouth, then closed it. I stepped closer. "If he was telling the truth, if he really loved you, why did he ask you to cut me out of your life? Why did he ask you to lie to your mom? Why did he need your money?" She shook her head. "He was trying to help me. By stealing your college fund?" I asked gently. Mia's breathing was shaky now. I could see it, the cracks forming, the battle inside her as her heart and her brain fought to make sense of what had just happened. He said it was an investment," she whispered. I softened my voice. "It wasn't. It was a scam. And you weren't the only one he was trying to fool." Tears spilled over, and she angrily wiped them away. I knew better than to push her, so I let her stand there, arms wrapped around herself, the truth sinking in, breaking apart everything she had convinced herself to believe. Rachel reached for her again, but Mia stepped back. I need to go." Rachel looked at me, silently asking what to do. I shook my head. "Let her." Mia turned and walked out of the restaurant, shoulders stiff, head down. Rachel hesitated, then exhaled. "She hates us." I shook my head. "She doesn't." Rachel looked at me. "She just said it to our faces." I met her eyes. "She's hurting. She's confused. She's mad." I exhaled. "But she doesn't hate us." Rachel's expression wavered. "How do you know?" "Because deep down, She knows the truth. Rachel swallowed. And now? I stared at the door Mia had just walked through, feeling the weight of everything that had happened, of everything that was still ahead. Now, I said quietly, we wait. Waiting. That was the hardest part. I had spent months watching Mia slip away, and now, after everything, after exposing Jordan, after watching her break right in front of me, I had no choice but to wait. It had been 3 days since the restaurant. 3 days since she had stormed out, since she had looked at me like I was the one who had betrayed her, since she had walked away without turning back. And in those 3 days, nothing. No calls. No texts. Silence. Rachel was struggling with it in her own way. She had spent the first day pacing, picking up her phone every 5 minutes like she expected Mia to magically change her mind and come home. By the second day, she had gone quiet, the exhaustion settling in her bones. By the third, she looked like she had aged 5 years. I didn't tell her, but I had barely slept. I told myself it was because I was waiting for Mia to reach out, but the truth was, I was terrified she wouldn't. What if we had pushed too hard? What if we had done the right thing but lost her in the process? What if, after everything, Jordan still won? The thought alone made me sick. So when my phone finally buzzed on the morning of the 4th day, I nearly knocked my coffee over trying to grab it. Mia. A text. Just one sentence. Can we talk? I stared at the screen for a long moment, my heart hammering. Then I typed back, of course. Where? A few seconds passed. Then, ice cream place? I exhaled. 3 years. That's how long we had been going to that little ice cream shop. It had started as a tradition after her dance classes, a way to bribe her into talking to me when she was younger. Over time, it became our thing. And now, she was reaching out. I grabbed my keys. The shop was nearly empty when I got there. It was late afternoon, too early for the usual evening crowd, but I had a feeling Mia had picked it for that reason. She was already there, sitting in the corner booth, hands wrapped around a small cup of mint chocolate chip, the same flavor she had always gotten. But she looked different. Not angry, not defiant, just tired. I walked over slowly, sliding into the seat across from her. She didn't look up at first, just kept her gaze on her ice cream, poking at it with her spoon. Finally, she exhaled. I don't know how to start. Then don't, I said gently. Just say whatever's on your mind. She hesitated. Then, quietly, I feel stupid. That took me off guard. Why? Her fingers tightened around the cup. Because I should have known. I should have seen it. But she swallowed. I wanted it to be real so bad that I ignored everything. I let her sit in that silence for a moment. Then I said, that doesn't make you stupid, Mia. That makes you human. Her eyes flicked up to mine, searching. You're not mad? I was never mad at you, I said softly. Frustrated? Sure. Scared? Definitely. But never mad. Her lips parted slightly, like she hadn't expected that. I leaned forward. Mia, you were lied to. Manipulated. That's not on you. That's on him. Her jaw clenched and I saw it again. That flicker of anger, but this time, it wasn't directed at me. Why did he do it? She asked. I sighed. Because that's who he is. He takes. He convinces people to give up everything for him, and then he disappears. It's what he's always done. She exhaled, rubbing her temple. I feel so stupid for believing him. You believed him because you wanted to, I said. And that's okay. We all want to believe that people can change. But the important thing isn't that you believed him. It's that now, you see the truth. She let that sit for a while. Then, barely above a whisper, she asked, why didn't you fight me harder? I frowned. What do you mean? When I was pulling away. When I erased you from the photos. When I said, she swallowed hard. When I said all those things. Why didn't you stop me? I studied her carefully. Would it have worked? She blinked. I shook my head. You weren't ready to hear the truth yet. If I had pushed harder, you would have just run faster. Her throat bobbed. But I never gave up on you, Mia, I added. Not for a second. She inhaled sharply, her grip on the spoon tightening. I said I hated you. I nodded. You did. She looked away, guilt flickering across her face. I didn't mean it. I know. Finally, her shoulders sagged, the weight she had been carrying for weeks crashing down. I'm sorry, she whispered. I reached across the table, covering her hand with mine. I know. She sniffed, wiping her nose. You're supposed to say, it's okay. I smiled gently. No, it's not okay. But it will be. She let out a breathy laugh, shaking her head. God, you're such a dad. I chuckled. You're just realizing that now? She rolled her eyes but didn't pull her hand away. Mom's been freaking out, she admitted. I figured. She thought I wasn't coming home. I met her gaze. Are you? She hesitated, then nodded. Yeah. I exhaled, relief washing over me. But Mia wasn't done. One condition, she said. I raised an eyebrow. Oh. She took a deep breath. I want to help. I frowned. Help with what? She looked me straight in the eye. I want to make sure he never does this to anyone else. I blinked. Mia. No, she said firmly. He used me. He used my friends. He almost stole my future. And I let him. Her hands clenched into fists. I don't want to just move on like it never happened. I want to do something about it. I studied her carefully, pride swelling in my chest. She wasn't just healing. She was fighting back. And I wasn't going to stop her. I nodded. Okay. She exhaled in relief. Okay. I glanced at her melted ice cream. You gonna eat that? She snorted. It's basically soup now. I grinned. Another round? She hesitated, then smiled. Yeah, let's do it. We stood up, walking toward the counter. And for the first time in months, Mia walked beside me. Not as someone trying to escape, but as someone ready to rebuild. Healing isn't a straight line. It's messy, unpredictable. Some days, it feels like progress. Other days, it feels like you're right back where you started. But today felt like progress. Mia had come home. Rachel and I had been sitting in the living room when we heard the front door unlock. The sound was so normal, so routine, that for a second, neither of us reacted. But then I saw Rachel freeze, her hands tightening around the throw pillow on her lap. I turned just in time to see Mia step inside. She wasn't carrying a suitcase, wasn't making a dramatic entrance. She just walked in, like she had done 1,000 times before. Rachel shot up from the couch. Mia? Mia hesitated in the doorway. Yeah, it's me. For a long, painful moment, Rachel didn't move. Like she wasn't sure if this was real, or if one wrong word would make Mia walk right back out. Then, she took a careful step forward. Are you? Yeah, Mia cut in. I'm staying. Rachel's breath hitched. I saw her throat bob as she swallowed the emotions threatening to spill over. Oh, sweetheart. Before she could finish, Mia crossed the room and hugged her. Rachel collapsed into the hug, wrapping her arms around Mia like she was afraid to let go. I sat back, watching them, letting them have this moment. Then Mia turned to me. She didn't rush toward me the way she had with Rachel, but she didn't hesitate, either. She just looked at me for a long second, then nodded. I meant what I said at the ice cream shop, she murmured. I nodded back. I know. And just like that, the weight I had been carrying for weeks finally started to lift. She was home. The next few days felt lighter. Mia wasn't avoiding us anymore. She didn't immediately go to her room and shut the door. She was still quiet, still processing everything, but she was here. She asked Rachel for help with her history project. She sat next to me on the couch and stole my popcorn during a movie. She stayed at the dinner table instead of rushing off after eating. Small things. Huge things. Then, one night, she knocked on my office door. I looked up from my laptop. Hey kid. She stepped inside, holding a manila envelope. I found this in my room, she said, placing it on my desk. Jordan asked me to mail it last week. I frowned, picking it up. What is it? Investment paperwork. For his startup. I flipped through the documents, my stomach twisting. Sure enough, it was exactly what I thought it was. A contract for an initial investment of $50,000. Mia, I said slowly, were you actually going to sign this? She shifted uncomfortably. I thought about it. I wanted to prove I believed in him. I exhaled sharply. And now? She met my gaze. I want to add it to the evidence file. I studied her. You sure? Yeah. She squared her shoulders. I want to be the one to hand it over. A slow smile tugged at the corner of my mouth. All right. I reached for my phone. Tomorrow morning, we deliver it together. The next morning, we walked into the district attorney's office. Mia had been quiet in the car, but now, as we stood in the hallway, I could see her nerves creeping in. She was gripping the envelope tightly, her fingers twitching slightly. I nudged her. You okay? She nodded quickly. Yeah, just it's weird. What is? She exhaled. I spent so long thinking he was the one person who really saw me, who believed in me. And now, I'm helping put him away. I nodded. That's not easy. She let out a soft laugh. No, it's really not. I glanced at her hands. You don't have to do this if you're not ready. She tightened her grip on the envelope. I am. Before I could say anything else, the door opened, and a woman in a navy blue suit stepped out. Mr. Carter? Mia. Mia straightened. That's us. The woman smiled. I'm Assistant District Attorney Wells. Come on in. The meeting didn't take long. Mia handed over the documents. She answered their questions. She told them everything she had heard Jordan say, every promise he had made, every lie he had fed her. She didn't hesitate. And when we left the office, stepping out into the cool morning air, she let out a deep breath and smiled. I raised an eyebrow. That a relief smile or a nervous smile? A little of both, she admitted. I grinned. Proud of you, kid. She smirked. You gonna start saying kiddo next? Absolutely not, I said. You'd disown me. She laughed, really laughed. And God, I had missed that sound. Then she nudged me. Ice cream? I blinked. At 10 in the morning? She grinned. Breakfast of champions. I shook my head, chuckling. Let's do it. And as we walked down the sidewalk, heading toward our favorite shop, I realized something. This wasn't just healing. This was rebuilding. Mia had made a choice. She had chosen the truth. She had chosen to fight back. And most importantly, she had chosen me.